The studio lights burned hot against Ibrahim Traore's skin as the laughter cascaded through the audience like falling glass. He sat rigidly in the plush interview chair, his expression carefully controlled despite the humiliation spreading through his chest. The host, Maxwell Grant, leaned back in his chair with a smirk that didn't reach his cold eyes. "So, Mr. Traore, or should I say, Captain Traore?" Grant made exaggerated air quotes. "You've managed to take control of one of the poorest countries in the world. Congratulations. That must be like becoming the captain of a sinking rowboat." The audience erupted in laughter again. Ibrahim's hand tightened imperceptibly on the armrest, the only outward sign of his inner turmoil. He had agreed to this interview to discuss Burkina Faso's new international initiatives and the challenges of governance after political transition. Instead, he had walked into an ambush on live television, broadcast to millions across America and streaming worldwide. "Tell me," Grant continued, his voice dripping with condescension, "how does someone with basically no diplomatic experience plan to run a country? I mean, your nation has what, the GDP of a medium-sized American shopping mall." Ibrahim leaned forward slightly, about to respond, when Grant cut him off to address the audience. "We'll get his answer after the break. Though I should warn you, we had to hire a translator because apparently, the education system there isn't great with languages either." The red recording light blinked off. Grant immediately stood up, not even glancing at Ibrahim as he strode toward his production team, leaving the dignitary sitting alone on stage. A young production assistant approached hesitantly. "Sir, can I get you some water during the break?" Ibrahim nodded, his mind racing. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about the dignity of his nation, about respect on the world stage. And in 4 minutes when that red light came back on, he would have to make a choice that would define not just this moment, but potentially the future of international relations for his country. 3 weeks earlier, Ibrahim had received the invitation through diplomatic channels. The Grant Show was one of America's most watched late-night programs, known for its mix of entertainment and hard-hitting interviews with politicians and world leaders. The producer's email had been effusive, an opportunity to present Burkina Faso's perspective to the world, and a platform for dialogue about West African sovereignty in the 21st century. Ibrahim's advisors had been split. His foreign minister, Adama Ouedraogo, had advised caution. "American media can be unpredictable," she had warned during their strategy meeting in the presidential palace in Ouagadougou. "Grant is known for blindsiding guests for ratings." But Ibrahim's communications director, Jean-Baptiste, had countered forcefully. "This is precisely the kind of visibility we need. Western media ignores Africa until they need crisis footage. This is our chance to control the narrative." In the end, Ibrahim had decided to accept. His country needed investment, needed recognition beyond the reductive stereotypes of poverty and conflict. The opportunity to speak directly to the American public seemed worth the risk. Now, sitting under the merciless studio lights as the makeup artist touched up his face during the commercial break, Ibrahim realized the depth of the miscalculation. Minutes before the show, Grant had greeted him warmly backstage. "Looking forward to our conversation," he had said, shaking Ibrahim's hand firmly. "I've been reading up on the challenges you're facing with resource nationalism. Fascinating stuff." Ibrahim had been encouraged. Perhaps this would be the substantive discussion he had hoped for. But the moment the camera started rolling, Grant had transformed, beginning with subtle jabs about Ibrahim's military background, then pivoting to increasingly derisive comments about Burkina Faso's economy, infrastructure, and governance. Now the floor director signaled 1 minute until they were back on air. Ibrahim took a deep breath as he recalled the briefing document Jean-Baptiste had prepared, which now seemed naive in its optimism. "This appearance will redefine international perceptions of our leadership." It certainly would, but not in the way they had hoped. As the countdown began, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Ibrahim made a decision. He would not play the role of the humiliated African leader. He would not give Grant the satisfaction. The red light blinked on, and Grant returned to his seat with a television-perfect smile. "Welcome back to the Grant Show. I'm here with Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso, who was just about to tell us how someone with his limited background plans to run a country." Grant's tone was light, conversational, as if he hadn't just spent the first segment systematically dismantling Ibrahim's credibility. The audience chuckled on cue. Ibrahim leaned forward, his posture straight, voice measured. "Thank you, Mr. Grant. I was indeed about to respond, though I note you seem to have strong preconceptions about both me and my nation." "Just keeping it real," Grant shrugged with exaggerated innocence. "Your country has had what, 8 coups in the last 50 years? That's not exactly stability. Political transitions reflect complex historical realities, Ibrahim began, only to be interrupted again. Let's talk about your human rights record, Grant said, abruptly changing tactics. Amnesty International has some concerns. Care to comment on the allegations of press suppression? Ibrahim opened his mouth to explain the nuanced security situation and the challenges of balancing free expression against targeted disinformation campaigns, but Grant was already talking over him. And what about your ties to Russia? Are you just another puppet in their chess game against Western interests? The question hung in the air like a slap. The audience fell silent, sensing they were witnessing something beyond the usual entertainment. Ibrahim felt a cold clarity descend upon him. This wasn't an interview. It was political theater designed to reinforce every negative stereotype about African leadership. Well, folks, I guess some people can't handle tough questions. When we come back, Hollywood's latest scandal. In the green room, Ibrahim's small security detail surrounded him as his phone began ringing incessantly. Jean-Baptiste's face appeared on the screen, panic evident even in the thumbnail image. "Sir, what have you done?" his communications director blurted when Ibrahim answered. "This is a diplomatic disaster. American social media is already calling you thin-skinned, authoritarian." Ibrahim cut him off. "Book us on the next flight home. We're done here." As the black SUV carried them away from the television studio, Ibrahim stared out the window at the glittering Manhattan skyline. He had come to America to build bridges. Instead, he found himself crossing a burning one, unsure what awaited on the other side. The flight back to Ouagadougou thundered through turbulent night skies. Ibrahim sat rigid in his seat, the harsh glow of his tablet illuminating his face in the darkened cabin. On screen, social media exploded with clips of his walkout, each replay of Grant's smirking face like salt in an open wound. His security chief, Laurent Zongo, approached and placed a tumbler of water beside him. "Sir," he said quietly, "CNN is calling it the African tantrum. Fox is worse. Twitter is divided." Ibrahim's jaw tightened, but he kept scrolling through intelligence briefings. A notification flashed. His presidential approval rating had spiked 27% since the incident. His people at least viewed the walkout as a defense of national honor. "Let them mock," Ibrahim said finally. "They expect either groveling apologies or impotent rage. They understand nothing else from African leaders." As lightning flashed outside the window, Ibrahim closed his reports and pulled out a worn leather journal from his breast pocket. "My grandfather's," he explained, noticing Zongo's curious gaze. "He was a griot, a keeper of our people's wisdom." Ibrahim ran his fingers over the faded script. "When I was 10, my grandfather took me to witness a village dispute resolution. A powerful elder had been publicly insulted, a grave offense. Everyone expected violence. The plane jolted through another pocket of turbulence, but Ibrahim barely noticed. Instead, the insulted elder invited his rival to co-judge the village's most prestigious wrestling tournament. Later, confused, I asked my grandfather why. Ibrahim's eyes met Zongo's. He said, "The weak man retaliates with anger. The strong man transforms his enemy through unexpected dignity." Zongo leaned forward. "You have a plan for Grant." A smile, the first since New York, crossed Ibrahim's face. "Not just for Grant. For the entire system that made him believe he could humiliate an African nation without consequence." His phone buzzed with a message from Adama, his foreign minister. The situation had escalated. Several Western media outlets were running stories questioning Burkina Faso's commitment to international dialogue. A U.S. State Department official had made an offhanded comment about regimes that can't handle scrutiny. "When we land," Ibrahim said after reading the message, "I'll make a brief statement. Then I need an urgent meeting with the full cabinet and the communications team." "What's our strategy, sir?" Zongo asked. Ibrahim's expression remained calm, but there was a new determination in his eyes. "We're going to respond to disrespect with such undeniable dignity and competence that it forces a reckoning." As the plane began its descent, Ibrahim pulled out a small, worn notebook, his grandfather's journal filled with proverbs and strategic wisdom passed down through generations. He opened to a marked page and read a line written in his grandfather's flowing script. "The lion does not turn around when a small dog barks." A hint of a smile crossed Ibrahim's face. Maxwell Grant and the international media thought they knew what kind of leader he was. They were about to discover how wrong they were. When the plane touched down in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim was the first to disembark. To the surprise of the waiting press corps, He walked directly to the microphones rather than hurrying to his motorcade as expected. "I returned to American soil seeking partnership and mutual respect," he began, his voice steady and clear. "That opportunity was denied, not just to me personally, but to the proud people of Burkina Faso." He paused, making eye contact with the cameras. "But out of moments of disrespect come the greatest opportunities for transformation. In the coming days, Burkina Faso will demonstrate to the world that dignity cannot be granted or taken away by a television host or any foreign power. Dignity is inherent in our sovereignty, and we will now exercise that sovereignty in ways that will surprise both our critics and our friends." Without taking questions, he walked to his waiting vehicle, leaving the journalists buzzing with speculation. What Ibrahim didn't mention was the plan already forming in his mind, a plan drawing on diplomatic traditions far older and perhaps more sophisticated than anything the American talk show host could imagine. In the presidential palace that evening, Ibrahim stood before his assembled advisors, their faces illuminated by the strategic holographic display that dominated the center of the room. "Our moment has arrived," Ibrahim announced, his voice cutting through the tension. "Not because of this American's disrespect, but because of what we will do with it." Jean-Baptiste, still shaken by the public relations fallout, leapt to his feet. "Sir, with respect, we must focus on damage control. The Western press is irrelevant," Ibrahim interrupted, his tone silencing the room. He tapped a command, and the holographic display transformed into a massive heat map of the Sahel region. "Tell me, what do you see here?" The economic minister squinted. "Our resource deposits? Gold, cotton." "Look deeper," Ibrahim challenged, enlarging the display. "This isn't about minerals or crops. This is solar radiation intensity, the most abundant, untapped energy resource on the planet." The display shifted again, revealing a network of potential solar installations and transmission lines stretching across 5 countries. "While they mock us on their television shows," Ibrahim continued, his finger tracing the glowing networks, "the world burns fossil fuels and fights wars for energy. Meanwhile, we sit atop a clean energy gold mine that could power half of Europe." Adama, the foreign minister, approached the display, her eyes widening. "You want to create an energy alliance." "Not just energy," Ibrahim corrected, expanding the projection to reveal financial models and diplomatic frameworks. "A complete inversion of the power dynamic. From beggars to suppliers. From colonies to partners." The room erupted in overlapping voices, objections, questions, excitement, until Ibrahim raised his hand for silence. "They expect us to either cower or rage," he said softly, yet every person heard him. "Instead, we will build something so valuable, so visionary, that they will have no choice but to engage with us as equals." As the implications sank in, Adama whispered what everyone was thinking. "If we succeed." "When we succeed," Ibrahim corrected, his eyes reflecting the glowing web of possibility before them, "we don't just change the narrative about Burkina Faso. We rewrite the future of Africa." As the meeting concluded near midnight, Ibrahim held back his foreign minister. "Adama, I need you to quietly reach out to your counterparts in Mali, Niger, Chad, and Ghana. What I'm proposing will require regional coordination." "And what about the Americans?" she asked. "The State Department has been calling non-stop." Ibrahim's expression remained calm. "Let them call. When we're ready, we'll answer, but on our terms, not theirs." After everyone had left, Ibrahim stood alone at his office window, looking out over the capital city's lights. The interview humiliation had awakened something in him, not just anger or wounded pride, but a realization that the post-colonial relationship between Africa and the West remained fundamentally unbalanced. Perhaps this very public disrespect was the catalyst needed for something revolutionary. His grandfather had taught him that true leadership emerged not during easy times but in moments of challenge. "The diamond is formed under pressure," the old man would say. Ibrahim picked up his phone and made a call to an unexpected recipient, a former classmate now working at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. "Musa," he said when his friend answered, "remember that renewable energy proposal you sent me last year? I think it's time to revisit it. How quickly can you return to Ouagadougou?" 3 days after Ibrahim's return to Burkina Faso, Maxwell Grant was enjoying unprecedented ratings. Clips of the walkout had gone viral, generating millions of views and sparking heated debates across social media platforms. Grant's supporters praised him for asking the tough questions, while critics accused him of disrespect and cultural insensitivity. Either way, his show was the center of attention. "We've been invited to the White House Correspondents' Dinner," his executive producer announced during their morning meeting. They want you to do a special segment. Grant smiled smugly. See? Controversy equals currency in this business. What Grant didn't know was that across the ocean, events were unfolding that would soon transform his viral moment from a career boost to something far more consequential. In Ouagadougou, Ibrahim had scarcely slept since his return. His days were filled with intensive meetings, not just with his own ministers but with delegations arriving discreetly from neighboring countries. The guest quarters of the presidential palace were filled to capacity with economic advisors, energy specialists, and security experts from across West Africa. On the fourth day, Ibrahim received a secure call from Paris. It was Marianne Dubois, a respected diplomat who had served as French ambassador to several African nations before her retirement. "Ibrahim," she said, dispensing with formalities, "what are you planning? My contacts tell me there's unprecedented movement between the Sahelian capitals." Ibrahim had always appreciated Dubois's direct approach. Unlike many European diplomats, she had made genuine efforts to understand the complex realities of post-colonial Africa. "Marianne," he replied carefully, "let's just say that sometimes public humiliation creates unexpected opportunities for transformation." There was a pause on the line. "This is about the Grant interview. This is about much more than one disrespectful American," Ibrahim corrected. "It's about recognizing that 70 years after independence, we're still playing by colonial rules." Another pause. "The Americans are concerned. There are rumors about Russian involvement, Chinese financing." Ibrahim allowed himself a small smile. "Isn't it interesting that when African nations pursue independent initiatives, the West immediately assumes we must be puppets of other powers? That perception is precisely what needs to change." "Be careful, Ibrahim," Dubois warned. "You're playing a dangerous game. The international order doesn't accommodate sudden changes well." "The international order was established without our meaningful participation," Ibrahim replied. "Perhaps it's time for that to change as well." After ending the call, Ibrahim joined a meeting already in progress in the palace's largest conference room. Maps were spread across the tables, alongside financial projections and engineering schematics. Representatives from 5 neighboring countries sat alongside Burkina Faso's ministers and a team of international experts recruited by Moussa Diallo, Ibrahim's MIT-educated friend. "The solar potential is unmatched anywhere in the world," Moussa was explaining, pointing to the vast Sahel region. "With distributed grid technology and the new storage systems, we could generate enough clean energy to power not just our own countries but export to Europe." The Ghanaian energy minister nodded. "The initial investment is substantial, but the return projections are impressive. More importantly," added Adama, "it creates genuine energy independence. No more dependency on foreign-controlled fossil fuels." Ibrahim studied the faces around the table, a mix of hope, skepticism, and determination. What had begun as his personal response to humiliation was rapidly evolving into something revolutionary. The Sahel Renewable Alliance, a proposed economic and energy consortium that would transform the region's vast solar potential into sustainable development and unprecedented leverage on the world stage. "The technical and financial aspects are falling into place," Ibrahim acknowledged. "But we must address the geopolitical implications. This initiative will not be welcomed by all international actors." The security chiefs from each country exchanged glances. Mali's representative spoke first. "We anticipate significant covert opposition. Certain interests benefit from our continued dependency. Which is why the security protocols must be impeccable," Ibrahim agreed. "And why public perception will be crucial." He nodded to Jean-Baptiste, who distributed digital tablets to everyone present. "This is our communication strategy. The narrative must be consistent across all member states." The plan outlined on the tablets was sophisticated. A coordinated rollout of the alliance that would present it as a visionary climate initiative, an economic development program, and, most importantly, a demonstration of African self-determination. "We launch in 3 phases, Ibrahim explained. "First, the environmental and economic case. Second, the technology partnerships. And finally, the sovereignty implications." "And the American incident?" asked the minister from Niger. "How does that factor in?" Ibrahim's expression remained neutral. "It becomes a footnote, the small indignity that preceded a historic transformation." As the meeting continued into the evening, none of the participants were aware that their communications were being monitored. Despite rigorous security measures, certain intelligence agencies had taken notice of the unusual diplomatic activity. In Washington, D.C., National Security Advisor Victoria Hendricks was reviewing a classified brief on her secure tablet when her assistant interrupted. "Madam, the Secretary of State is calling. He says it's urgent." Hendricks excused herself from the meeting and took the call in her private office. "Tom, what's so important it couldn't wait an hour?" "We have a situation developing in West Africa," the secretary replied without preamble. "Something called the Sahel Renewable Alliance. Initial assessment suggests it could significantly alter our strategic positioning in the region." Hendricks frowned. "An energy consortium? That hardly seems like a crisis." "It's not just energy, Victoria. Our analysts believe this is a coordinated move toward reducing Western influence in a resource-rich region. And the intelligence suggests it was accelerated after that talk show incident with Ibrahim Traore." "The walkout." Hendricks was incredulous. "That was just entertainment news." "Apparently not to them," the secretary countered. "This looks like a sophisticated response to what they perceived as a national insult. And they've managed to bring multiple countries on board in record time." Hendricks massaged her temple, feeling a headache forming. "So a talk show host may have triggered a geopolitical realignment. Wonderful. What's the recommendation?" "State recommends diplomatic engagement before this gains more momentum. Defense is pushing for a more assertive approach." "Of course they are," Hendricks muttered. "Keep me updated. I'll brief the president this evening." Across the Atlantic, unaware of the growing concern in Washington, Ibrahim was concluding the day's negotiations. As the various delegations retired to their quarters, he took a moment alone on the palace balcony, looking up at the stars. His phone vibrated with a news alert. The Grant Show had just posted record-breaking ratings, with Maxwell Grant smugly thanking the thin-skinned dictator for the publicity boost. Accompanying the story was a cartoon caricature of Ibrahim fleeing the interview stage in tears. Ibrahim stared at the image for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He laughed, a genuine deep laugh that echoed across the balcony. An aide appeared at the doorway, alarmed by the sound. "Sir? Is everything all right?" Ibrahim held up the phone, still chuckling. "They think this is about wounded pride, about a man feeling insulted on television." He shook his head. "They have no idea what they've awakened." He turned back to the starlit sky where satellites, some of which would soon be controlled by the Sahel Alliance, traced their paths across the heavens. "Let Grant enjoy his momentary triumph," Ibrahim murmured. "He believes he's won a ratings battle, while we're positioning to reshape the global economic order." Ibrahim's expression hardened with resolve. What began as a humiliating ambush will become the catalyst for a historic shift, one that will force not just a talk show host but entire nations to reconsider their assumptions about African leadership. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the moment. The stakes had escalated far beyond a damaged reputation. Now they involved the future of a continent, and perhaps the world. 2 weeks after the infamous interview, Maxwell Grant strutted into the network's executive boardroom for his contract renewal meeting. The ratings had been astronomical. His humiliation of the African leader had gone viral globally, sparking fierce debates about journalistic ethics versus asking the tough questions. Politicians were clamoring to appear on his show to prove their toughness. "Maxwell." The network president rose to greet him, flanked by uncomfortable-looking executives. "Please sit." Grant settled into the chair, already mentally spending his expected raise. "I assume you've seen the numbers. I've single-handedly redefined political interviewing for the streaming age." The president exchanged glances with the others. "Yes, about that. Before we discuss terms, there's something you should see." The wall-mounted screen flickered to life with breaking news footage. Ibrahim Traore stood at a gleaming glass podium, flanked by leaders from 5 African nations. Behind them, a massive digital display showed the Sahara Desert transformed by an intricate network of futuristic solar installations. "Today marks a new chapter in African self-determination," Ibrahim was saying, his composed voice a stark contrast to the man who had walked off Grant's set. "The Sahel Renewable Alliance will harness our region's abundant solar resources to generate 200 gigawatts of clean energy by 2030, enough to power our nations and export electricity to Europe." The camera panned across the assembled leaders, their unified front unmistakable. "What the hell is this?" Grant demanded. The network's research director cleared her throat. "Mr. Traore has organized the largest Pan-African energy initiative in history. Tesla, Siemens, and 3 Asian conglomerates have already committed technology partnerships. The EU is negotiating purchase agreements." "It's a publicity stunt," Grant scoffed. These African megaprojects are announced every year. They never happen. Not this time, the network president said grimly. Our energy sector sources confirm it's real and revolutionary. They've secured $17 billion in initial funding from African development banks and sovereign wealth funds. On screen, Ibrahim continued, the Sahel will no longer be defined by its challenges, but by its solutions, not just for Africa, but for the global climate crisis and energy security. Something cold formed in Grant's stomach as the network president slid a document across the table. Not his expected contract renewal, but something else entirely. What's this? Grant asked, already knowing the answer. The State Department called this morning, the president said quietly. Your interview didn't just humiliate a man. It may have accidentally triggered a geopolitical realignment. She was interrupted by Grant's phone ringing. It was the network president. Maxwell, the president said without preamble, I just got a call from the State Department. They're requesting you don't comment on this Sahel Alliance situation on tonight's show. Grant blinked in surprise. Since when does State care about my commentary? Since your little interview stunt apparently triggered a diplomatic situation. They're in delicate negotiations and don't want any inflammatory statements complicating things. After ending the call, Grant turned back to Rachel with a puzzled expression. Since when does a talk show interview affect international relations? Since you publicly humiliated a head of state on national television, she replied bluntly. The narrative they're pushing is that your disrespect crystallized the need for a new approach to Western relations. Grant dismissed her concern with a wave. Please. They're giving me way too much credit. Rachel hesitated, then handed him one final document, a private intelligence briefing that had been leaked to their research department. You should read the assessment on page 3. Grant scanned the document, his expression gradually shifting from skepticism to concern as he read. The Traore incident, while seemingly minor, appears to have served as a catalyst, accelerating regional cooperation and anti-Western sentiment among populations traditionally divided by colonial-era boundaries. In leveraging a moment of perceived national humiliation into a platform for unprecedented regional cooperation, Traore has demonstrated sophisticated strategic thinking that warrants careful monitoring. For the first time since the interview, Grant felt a flicker of unease. What if his ratings-grabbing ambush had unintentionally sparked something much larger? Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim was meeting with Musa in a specialized situation room established to coordinate the alliance's complex launch. Screens displayed real-time updates from capitals across the region and around the world. The initial international response exceeds our projections, Musa reported. The environmental angle has gained traction with European publics, and the economic potential has financial markets paying attention. Ibrahim nodded, studying a display showing social media sentiment analysis. And the sovereignty messaging? Resonating strongly across the global south, Adama interjected, joining them with a tablet in hand. We're receiving unofficial expressions of support from countries in South America and Southeast Asia. They're watching how we manage this. And the Americans? Ibrahim asked. Adama's expression grew more serious. As expected, mixed signals. The State Department has requested formal discussions. Pentagon activity suggests contingency planning. Corporate interests are divided, some seeing opportunity, others threatened. Ibrahim considered this information carefully. And Maxwell Grant? A small smile crossed Adama's face. Suddenly very quiet. His network received pressure to tone down any commentary about you or the alliance. Predictable, Ibrahim commented. Now comes the critical phase. They will first attempt to co-opt our initiative, then to undermine it. He turned to a detailed timeline projected on the central screen. We accelerate phase 2. Begin the technical demonstrations at the pilot site ahead of schedule. And arrange the international press tour, but with a twist. What kind of twist? Musa asked. I want to include American journalists, Ibrahim explained. Not just the usual international correspondents, but specifically business and technology reporters. And one more. Adama looked up from her tablet. Who? Christina Wong, Ibrahim said. Maxwell Grant's former co-host, who left the show after alleging ethical breaches in their interview practices. Understanding dawned on Mousa's face. Strategic. We're not seeking revenge, Ibrahim clarified. We're changing the narrative while creating unexpected alliances. The following day, as predicted, the diplomatic outreach began. The U.S. ambassador requested an urgent meeting, arriving at the presidential palace with an economic advisor and a military attaché. President Traore, the ambassador began after formal greetings, my government views the Sahel Renewable Alliance with great interest. We believe American technological expertise could be valuable to your initiative. Ibrahim received this overture with diplomatic courtesy. The United States' experience in renewable energy is indeed notable. We welcome discussions with all potential partners who accept our core principles. And those principles are? The economic advisor inquired. Full African ownership of both infrastructure and intellectual property. Transparent financing with no hidden political conditions. And respect for our sovereignty, both political and economic, Ibrahim stated firmly. The ambassador maintained her professional smile, but Ibrahim noted the slight tension in her posture. Those are ambitious terms. They are necessary ones, Ibrahim replied. For too long, international partnerships have perpetuated dependency rather than fostering genuine development. The conversation continued for an hour, with the Americans probing for weaknesses or divisions they might exploit. They found none. Ibrahim had prepared meticulously, anticipating every question and potential pressure point. As the delegation was leaving, the ambassador made one final attempt. My government wishes to express that recent cultural misunderstandings should not affect our nation's historically strong relationship. Ibrahim smiled politely. I agree completely, Ambassador. Individual incidents, no matter how publicly disrespectful, do not define international relations. Actions and systems do. After they departed, Ibrahim reviewed secure communications from alliance partners. Similar diplomatic approaches had been made to each member country, some with veiled threats, others with generous incentives to break ranks. None had succeeded. Phase 2 of the strategic comeback was proceeding exactly as planned. What had begun as one leader's humiliation was transforming into a masterclass in diplomatic leverage and strategic patience. In New York, Maxwell Grant was beginning to realize he had unwittingly stepped into something much larger than a ratings battle. His producer had just informed him that his invitation to moderate the World Economic Forum panel had been quietly rescinded, with the official explanation citing scheduling conflicts. The unofficial reason, conveyed through industry channels, was that certain African and European participants had indicated they would withdraw if Grant moderated. More troublingly, Grant was now receiving daily briefings about the expanding influence of the Sahel Alliance. What he had dismissed as a publicity stunt was gaining legitimate international recognition. Even more galling, his former co-host Christina Wong had just announced an exclusive behind-the-scenes documentary on the alliance's development, with unprecedented access to Ibrahim and other regional leaders. Grant paced his office, struggling to process how a simple interview designed to boost ratings had spiraled into a situation affecting his career and international relations. For the first time, he began to consider that he might have seriously underestimated Ibrahim Traore. Rachel, he called to his producer, get me everything you can find on traditional diplomatic practices in Burkina Faso. Historical conflict resolution, negotiation techniques, everything. Why? She asked, surprised by the request. Grant stared at the television screen, which was showing footage of Ibrahim confidently addressing the United Nations General Assembly. Because I think I'm missing something important about how he's playing this game. 4 months after the interview incident, the Sahel Renewable Alliance had evolved from concept to reality with remarkable speed. Construction had begun on the first major solar installation. International investment was flowing in under the strict sovereignty provisions Ibrahim had established, and political support across the region was solidifying. More significantly, the initiative had sparked similar movements across the global south, with leaders explicitly citing the Sahel model as inspiration for asserting greater control over their resources and international relationships. In Washington, the National Security Council convened an emergency session to address what was now being called the Sahel situation. Present were representatives from state, defense, treasury, and intelligence agencies, along with select corporate stakeholders with interests in the region. National Security Advisor Hendricks opened the meeting with a stark assessment. The situation has progressed beyond our initial projections. What began as a regional energy initiative has evolved into a political movement that threatens decades of established influence structures. The economic implications alone are concerning, added the Treasury representative. This new model could severely restrict Western access to critical resources if it continues to spread. And we still believe this was triggered by a talk show interview? Asked a skeptical defense official. Catalyzed, not caused, clarified the CIA analyst. Our assessment indicates long-standing resentments were channeled through this specific incident. Traore proved exceptionally skilled at transforming a personal humiliation into a rallying point for regional solidarity. Options? Asked Hendricks, looking around the table. Standard playbook, suggested a State Department official. Identify divisions between member states, offer preferential deals to the weakest links, highlight governance concerns in international forums. We've tried that, Hendricks replied tersely. They anticipated those moves. Next. More aggressive options are available, said the defense representative cautiously. Absolutely not, Hendricks cut him off. The optics would be catastrophic, especially given current global sentiment. After 2 hours of increasingly tense discussion, a consensus emerged. The situation required direct, high-level engagement. The president would send a special envoy to meet with Ibrahim and other alliance leaders. And we need media support to reshape the narrative, Hendricks concluded. Get me a meeting with the network executives. 3 days later, Maxwell Grant was surprised to receive a call from his network CEO. Maxwell, we need you to take on a special assignment, the executive began without preamble. An exclusive interview with some significant policy implications. Grant perked up. His ratings had begun to slide as the novelty of the Traore incident faded. Who's the subject? Ibrahim Traore. Grant nearly dropped his phone. You're joking. He'd never agree to speak with me again. He already has, the CEO replied. On certain conditions. The conditions, Grant discovered with growing horror, were unprecedented. The interview would take place not in New York but in Ouagadougou, in a purpose-built circular arena that could seat 5,000 spectators. It would be co-moderated by Christina Wong, the colleague who had left Grant's show after accusing him of ethical violations. Most shocking of all, it would follow a traditional West African dialogue format called the Truth Circle, with equal time guaranteed and zero editing permitted. This is beyond ridiculous, Grant exploded, pacing the CEO's office. They're not requesting an interview, they're demanding a public trial. The CEO remained impassive. The State Department has made their position clear. This situation has escalated beyond media into matters of national security and international relations. So I'm being sacrificed for diplomacy? Grant's voice rose dangerously. The CEO slid a document across the desk. Grant's contract with highlighted sections. Not sacrificed, Maxwell. Directed. Section 17B clearly gives the network authority to assign special projects of national importance. Grant stared at the paper, then at the stern faces of the network executives. And if I refuse? Then you breach contract during a matter involving State Department interests, the CEO said quietly. I don't need to spell out the implications for your career. Grant felt the floor shift beneath him. For the first time in his meteoric career, he understood what it meant to be truly powerless. When do I leave? He asked hoarsely. 2 weeks later, Grant found himself on a flight to Burkina Faso, accompanied by a minimal crew and Christina Wong, who had barely spoken to him since boarding. He spent the flight reviewing briefing materials on the Sahel Alliance's progress and cultural notes on traditional Burkinabe dialogue practices. The traditional format, he learned, involved each participant making complete statements without interruption, followed by the other's response. A council of elders, in this case respected diplomats from neutral countries, would ensure adherence to the rules. It was about as far from Grant's confrontational interview style as possible. Upon landing in Ouagadougou, Grant was stunned by what awaited him. Where he had expected a dusty, underdeveloped capital, he found himself in an ultra-modern solar-powered airport terminal that gleamed with polished stone and cutting-edge technology. Even more unsettling was the public response to his arrival. Digital billboards throughout the city displayed countdown clocks to what was being called the dialogue, and international press from 6 continents had converged to witness the confrontation.